Excellent. Perfect. Thank you for everyone for joining. My name's Amer Latif. I'm the Vice President of Sales with PresentPal. I'm joined today with Adam Kosakowski. I hope I haven't killed the last name there and
No,
said it right.
sounded fine to me.
Brilliant. Adam is the AT specialist at the Neet Center, and he'll tell you a little bit more about it later on too. But the topic of our presentation today is the impact of ineffective presentation accommodations. We'll elaborate that on a little bit further. For those who've not seen PresentPal before, there's also a great opportunity. You guys will get to see the tool. We'll give you a little bit of highlight and a little bit of surprise at the end. Also, something we're introducing in 2021 for people about our pilot program. Uh, I'm also, by the way, monitoring. So if you see me pause for a little bit about who's coming in, people are attending. So I'll be accepting people in too. So apologies in advance if you hear me pause for a bit. I'm also joined by my lovely colleague, Kara Hunt, who is our Chief Marketing Officer at PresentPal. She will be providing support on the chat box. So any questions you have, feel free to type your questions in there. At the end, we do have a section for Q&A where we'll take your questions live, and Adam and I will be hopefully able to answer most of them. If there's any that we're not able to, get in touch with us. We'll give you our email address details, and you can reach out to us at any point. Always love nice, curious emails. So let me just admit a few more people. I did warn you guys about the pauses. One thing before we get started, I thought I'd mention about our commitment to accessibility. This is important. And the reason why it's important to us is we're always striving to improve. So please do let us know if there are other things that we could improve on in terms of our delivery of this presentation or any other items that we could actually make it more accessible. So some things we always look to consider and take part in, and always looking to improve. So value your feedback. Please let us know if anything else we could do. We've done our introductions. I'm gonna launch a poll just after this brief overview slide here. We'll go straight into Adam's presentation part where he's going to talk about the communication challenges and how institutions are addressing it or why it's an issue. We'll also then look at the tool, PresentPal tool. And this is where also I will talk about the pilot program, and elaborate a little bit further on this. There'll be a final poll that we'll run, and we'll go through the live Q&A. So hopefully everything will go as smooth as a breeze, I say. Okay, and now I am going to proceed ahead, and we will share this lovely Jim Carrey slide, which triggers me to say, launch a poll. So on your screen now, you'll see a poll being launched. This is just for us to get a better understanding of what you have seen so far. So what accommodations have you seen for oral presentations? You can select multiple options here, by the way. So please select any that apply here, and we'll share the results too. But also very useful for Adam and myself to understand what you've seen, and we can compare it with what we've also seen and heard. Let it run for maybe a couple more seconds so everyone gets a chance to populate this. Okay, about to end the poll now. And let's actually share the results. Interestingly, Adam, I'll let you speak on this too, but you can clearly see there's one clear majority here where the student can present to instructor or smaller group size, possibly. The student can record a video and present that instead. That's 47%. Also 47%, the student can submit a written paper instead. But what does this tell you, Adam? I mean, what are you reading into this?
This is pretty much what I expected to see, which is good because it means even though it's been a couple of years since I worked in higher ed, that the accommodations being offered for presentations and assignments requiring oral communication is about the same. And we're going to talk a lot about all of this very soon.
Brilliant. Okay, I will stop the share results there. But very interesting, and thank you for participating in our friendly light poll there. And we will move on. Adam, over to you. I will go on mute.
All
These are
right.
your slides, my friend.
Thank you very much. So, hello, everyone. I am Adam Kosakowski. I am an AT specialist, living the dream. I have a full time job as an AT specialist at Neet, New England Assistive Technology, which is a part of Oak Hill. And Oak Hill is the biggest private provider of disability services in Connecticut in the USA. My Twitter handle is at Neet with Adam. My email is adam.kozakowski at oakhillct.org. And in my role as AT specialist, I have the opportunity to do assistive technology evaluations, consultations, and I work a lot with students in K through 12 and sometimes in college, helping to identify assistive technology to help them better access their education. But prior to my time as an AT specialist, I worked in a couple of different colleges, both private and state. And I had a couple of different titles, but my role in all those circumstances was pretty much the same. I was the one in charge of the disability services offices or the student accessibility services. They had a couple different names. It depended on the college and their culture. I was the one in charge of approving accommodations, which means I met with students who identified with disabilities, who would provide disability documentation and have an intake meeting with me to discuss what their needs were in the college area. And because of that experience, I'm very passionate about accommodations and assistive technology. And I really wanted to share a lot of that today. And luckily, Present Pal approached me, and I'm very happy to present with all of you today. Next slide, please. All right. So, when talking about accommodations in college, I always found it useful to compare accommodations in college to high school, largely because in the positions that I held in higher ed, I worked often with students transitioning to college from high school. So, recent graduates from their senior year of high school and that sort of thing. And the transition from high school to college for students with disabilities is arguably the most challenging transition compared to the transition of their neurotypical peers. And it was also a challenging transition for their parents as well, because let's face it, they're changing schools, they're moving away from home in many cases, they're living on campus when there's not a pandemic. And that transition is very challenging because they had a lot of support in high school, especially if those students with disabilities had an IEP, thanks to the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. So, in high school, students were protected under the IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Under that act, they very likely had an IEP, an individual education plan, meaning the school was in agreement on a set of objectives and a different way to deliver the curriculum loaded with accommodations to meet that student's need. And we compare that to the college area, where instead of being protected by the IDEA, students then transition to being protected by a different law, a set of laws actually, the Americans with Disabilities Act, Rehabilitation Act, and Section 504. Now, these laws are very different because the IDEA that protects them in K through 12 in the US is an educational benefit law, and the laws protecting them in college are civil rights laws. The big difference here is that the laws protecting students in K through 12 are all about providing free and appropriate education. The focus is different in college, where there, the focus of the laws is to eliminate barriers. So when you think about it, one law in the high school area is focused on providing success, when the laws protecting students in college is about providing access. There is some intersection between those two ideas, but how they play out is often different, and we're going to talk about that. So keep that in mind as we go on to the next slide. All right, so I have to laugh because my usually peaceful cat is running around right now. He usually doesn't do this. I just find it funny. Sorry about that. You probably won't hear him, so that's good. Anyway, accommodations in college. The goals of accommodations in college, with the spirit of the ADA, is to eliminate barriers created by the disabilities and how those disabilities interact with the curriculum. The problem itself is not the disability. It never is. It's always in how the curriculum is created and how that interacts with the disabilities. And when there is a mismatch between the curriculum and how the disability impacts a student, that's where accommodations come into to kind of fix the situation and bridge that gap. And the goal of these accommodations is to provide the students with disabilities the same to provide them with access to the same curriculum to that of their peers, compared to high school, where the accommodations provide them with a different curriculum. So the big thing here is accommodations are not meant to change the assignment. They're not meant to fundamentally alter the course. They're not meant to change the goals of the assignment that the professor put in place when they created the assignment. Next slide, please. This cat, what are you doing? I've never seen them like this. Of course, it happens now. It's so funny. All right. So, thank you for laughing, Kelly. I appreciate it. It's just the reality of working from home, right? With this year. So, earlier, we shared potential accommodations that some colleges, many colleges still offer. Prior to this presentation, it's been a couple of years since I've been in higher ed, so I wanted to make sure I was still up to date. And the results of the survey helped clarify that for me, which is awesome. I did some research into some Ivy League schools and that kind of thing, and I found out that these accommodations are still pretty common and they're available. When students request them, they need to show disability documentation that clearly states why these accommodations are needed. And then students typically have to work with the professor, work with the coordinator of disability services or the director, whoever approves of accommodations, to discuss the need. And the caveat here I want to say is when you're in disability services and you're approving those accommodations, every decision is supposed to be unique to that student. While a lot of students might have the same accommodation, the reason why the accommodation is approved is supposed to be unique to that student, unique to the barriers that their disability creates in accessing the curriculum. So please keep that in mind. With that in mind, some of these accommodations might be more problematic than others. It always depends on the context and how they are used. For example, the most common one that a lot of you on the survey saw was student presents to instructor and a small group. I can think of a scenario where this accommodation would not fundamentally alter the goals of the presentation assignment, and I can think of options where it would fundamentally alter. Take, for example, the class in question. If the class in question was a public speaking class, and the goal of the assignment was to present to a large group of peers to get that experience to prepare you for a marketing job where you're going to be presenting to stakeholders in a large group and like across a long table, then having an accommodation where you present instead to a smaller group might be fundamentally altering the course because it's changing the goals and it's no longer giving access to the same experience that your peers would be having um, experience with. Now, by comparison, if the professor just wanted to have the goal of you present to a group of your peers so that they can ask questions and rate and critique your presentation afterwards, those goals might still be attainable fine with a small group of students. So it depends on the situation. Similar with the second one, student records video and presents that instead. This could be potentially problematic or it could be fine. If presentations are virtual, I've noticed that professors are offering the opportunity for students to present with a video instead of live and just show that video during the presentation. Now, if the professor offers that to everyone, that means this accommodation isn't really even needed. So it would be fine in that case. But when you take into account a student showing a video in person when the rest of their class is presenting live, there could be some issues there. For example, the person presenting the video doesn't have to do it in one take. They can record it and edit it and show their best self. And if the goal of the presentation is to, be ready to think on the spot and present your findings in one take and answer questions and that kind of thing, showing a video might change that, and that could be potentially problematic. The third one is kind of overtly changing the assignment. Student submits a written paper instead. So again, if this was a public speaking class, you could probably see where I'm going with this, that this could easily be fundamentally changing the course. But if the professor is simply happy with the student showing their understanding of the content and the delivery is not super important to them, then this could be okay. Depends on the class, depends on the student, depends on their need, the curriculum. All that matters when accommodation decisions are made. Then the last one's kind of interesting. Student presents with a partner. I can think of a spectrum of situations here. Now, if a student with the accommodation is allowed to present with a partner and the partner does 50% of the work, does 50% of the presentation and that sort of thing, while the rest of the class presents alone, that could be quite different. That could fundamentally alter everything. But by comparison, think of the other end of the spectrum. What if the student giving the presentation has some physical disabilities where they can deliver the content orally, but changing the slides and navigating the interface and all that at the same time is very taxing to them and thus creates a pretty big barrier. And what if the partner is kind of like a moderator, like Amer right now for me, for changing the slides and that kind of thing? In that case, this accommodation makes complete sense because it's mitigating the barrier of the student reaching the goal of delivering the content and showing their understanding. So it depends on the context. It could be potentially problematic. It could be okay. And when I was in disability services, at that time, many of the combinations that I approved made complete sense to me, but presentations was always the most challenging. And that's because at that time, with my level of knowledge I had back then, and my lack of um, having assistive technology that I could offer, made it so that when students requested some of these accommodations, I found myself often going, I know you need something. I don't want you to have to present to the group of your peers um, because I know that creates a barrier for you. But these are the only presentation accommodations that I know of. And I know, and I, instead of sending you in there with nothing, I want to send you in there with something. So I often would approve of something and then and then say to myself, I know this isn't ideal. There needs to be a better way. And we're going to start talking about that very soon. Next slide, please. So the reason this was challenging is because the whole goal of accommodations in higher ed is to provide access. It's not to fundamentally change the curriculum or anything like that. So sometimes when I approved of these accommodations, and I'm sure this has happened to other institutions as well, when they approved of these accommodations, they were over accommodating, and it wasn't out of an act of being nefarious or anything like that. They were trying to meet the needs of the students, but instead of just providing access, they were providing more than that, and that's where things become challenging. Just a second. So over accommodating happens when there's a mismatch between the barrier and the accommodation being given. And the challenge there is instead of providing access, you kind of start to provide success. And while we want our students to be successful, in the college arena, the goal is to provide access to the student so they can provide their own success. You want them to be independent and have the opportunity to do that, And to do that, you're supposed to grant them the access to that opportunity. And when you over accommodate, you're not really following the spirit of the AA and just eliminating the discrimination. And that's the challenge there. There could potentially be legal issues here. I would guess that a student being over accommodated would be happy with the accommodation they were being given, so they would not make a complaint to the Office of Civil Rights or anything like that. But when students are approved of accommodations, sometimes it's obvious. So a student might be presenting with a partner while the rest of the class is not, and students not presenting with a partner might say, "That's interesting. I wonder why that is." Or if a student presents gives a paper to an instructor instead of a presentation, that could be noticeable as well. And there have been I used to in higher ed, I used to hear of um, lawsuits being brought up with the OC, Office of Civil Rights, all the time regarding accommodations and that kind of thing. And it always came down to a mismatch between the barrier and the accommodation. So just something to keep in mind. Next slide, please. So when I was in higher ed, I missed working. I wanted to be an AT specialist. And every position I had in higher ed, I was really hoping that I could work more with AT, but I never had the opportunity. So when I had a career change opportunity come up at Neet, I jumped on it because that was my dream job. It was what I call dream job territory, and it still is. And the reason assistive technology is so awesome is because when there's a mismatch between the accommodation and the barrier, AT can bridge that gap where the accommodation alone otherwise would not be able to. So instead of an accommodation for a small group presentation or presenting with a partner, the right AT with that student could help them better independently access the presentation or oral communication experience so that they could have the same education experience compared to that of their peers. And a great example for that type of AT is PresentPal. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Adam, and brilliant in terms of the information you've shared there through your experience. Really appreciate that, and I can see we'll probably get some more questions picking your brain on that experience too, and the actual cause and effect of actually not solving this communication challenge for a lot of students, particularly starting from K-12. Um, and just to before I get started in terms of showing you guys PresentPal how it works, I thought what would be good is to point out again. I've got Kara, my colleague, who's handling any questions you have on the chat box, and please do type in any questions you have on the Q&A or the chat box area. We will take questions live at the end, so don't panic if we don't get to your questions right away, but we will try to get through all the questions at the end. So bear with us. If we don't, please do get in touch with us via email if there's anything we haven't been able to answer. Okay, so probably good to know about the journey of why this tool was created and what was the passion and drive that led to this. And the reason I have a picture of this gentleman here is for a purpose. It's not random. This gentleman's Chris Hughes. He's the founder and owner of PresentPal. And the journey is important because this talks about the passion and drive that led to Chris and and the team to develop PresentPal. What happened is when Chris was going to through business school at university, part of his coursework was to present 2 to 3 times a week. Now, Chris was diagnosed with dyslexia from the age of 13. So, being optimistic, Chris said, "Okay, that's fine. I will actually just try to use some flashcards, standard flashcards, and I'll write down my notes on it." And his first attempt was trying it that way. What he found out was that did not work because he couldn't read his handwriting, for one, but also it's difficult to stay organized and keep his flow going. It added and built up his stress and anxiety more. So the next step for Chris at this point was to approach Disability Student Allowance, which is the UK body of providing any technology or assistance to any student registered with a disability in higher education. So By approaching them, Chris said, okay, I need help with regards to public communication, presentations. What can you do for me? And his first answer he got that there was no technology available. Okay, what can you do for me? Still same question. And this is where it aligns very close, Adam, to the slides you had shared in terms of the options that were presented over to Chris. So one option, um, surprisingly at that time, but not surprisingly after we've seen those slides, was actually you can skip the presentations altogether. Not to worry, that's fine. Um, we can speak to the instructor, and you don't have to do those presentations. Uh, Not a very inclusive solution, obviously, because not only did it not allow Chris to develop key skill sets within that business school that other students were going to take part in, but it wasn't this journey that he wanted. He didn't want that sort of cut towards achieving potentially just a degree. He needed the skill sets too. Um, Second option, you can present to the smaller class size, and this again did not take away the problem of the stress and anxiety. It wasn't the size that was really a big problem for Chris at times. It was more dealing with new content and presenting it. So the stress and anxiety still stayed there. Third option presented was, um, okay, we'll give you more time to present. Again, go back to Adam's slides there. Having more time doesn't remove the stress and anxiety away. In a lot of cases, it'll actually increase it because it'll just build up towards that one big moment that you have to deliver this. So you're just kicking a can further down the road. Um, Now, this is the moment that I actually triggered that passion and drive. So remember what I was talking about, what led to Present Pal being created? That's the spark that kind of triggered, because the question that Chris had is, surely I cannot be alone in this problem. Others may be facing this too. So he went inquisitively to search this out further. And common knowledge is that public speaking is obviously one of the biggest fears for a lot of people, right? He wanted to get a little bit more micro on this, understand it a little bit more. Why communication itself is difficult for people, and looking at things like memory recall, um, uh, trying to focus in and remember what you're going to talk about, what you're talking about next, and also keeping in line with your slides. But then you go back to the visual stresses. For a lot of people, the visual stress delivering a presentations very, very overwhelming, and that is the cascading effect into leading the stress and anxiety building up during your presentation. And that could be because of delivering to your peers, your managers, administrators, anyone, or people you don't even know. All of those things can add up. Interestingly, in this current climate, the non-visual stress of delivering presentations or webinars on via webinars is equally daunting, but for different challenges. It builds up stress and anxiety for different reasons, because you do not get those visual reassurances like a head nod or someone in the crowd just reassuring you that okay, your message is getting through. So personally, for myself, the non-visual stresses are also there with this current climate. If you are doing a lot of presentations on Zoom, for example, uh, other elements that Chris found out in his research further to qualify how big is this problem were things like actually keeping on track, not getting distracted by focus, by losing focus of what you're actually talking about, which can happen very easily. You may get a random question being asked during your presentation. All of a sudden, you lost your train of thought. Your linear thinking goes out the window, and now you're struggling to find out, okay, where was I again? That classic question. And let me try to remember and pick up my rhythm again. All this overload is essentially what led to this problem being bigger than what we were originally looking at, or what Chris was originally looking at. And it qualified that for him. And it led to Chris and the team developing PresentPal. And I present to you, no pun intended, PresentPal. Essentially, it is an app that you would download on your tablet or your smartphones, and it works both on Android and iOS devices. As you can see from the layout, it's very intuitive, deliberately so. It's set up not to be too heavy, feature heavy at the start, so not to overwhelm students. A problem with a lot of assistive technology right now is sometimes when you do open it up, it can scare students away. And particularly if they're K-12 students or students that are just coming into higher education and not familiar with that new technology, it kind of ends up defeating the purpose. So you want something that they can easily pick up and access the features fairly intuitively. And it's designed that way. What you're essentially creating here is virtual flashcards. Um, and I go back to that example of when you were having the flashcards or Chris used those flashcards. I remember the reasons why Chris found them difficult. One, he couldn't read them properly, and the train of thought was he would lose the train of thought at times or the focus. It addresses those and a little bit more, and I'll touch on those points a little bit later on. Just to also add on, we've recently added the integration with PowerPoint. I'll explain that a little bit later too. Thanks, Adam. I like the hand wave there. So what it looks like when you build this your flashcards, you'll have your slides on on the right hand side. So, for example, in this case, slide one is the anatomy of the heart, and what the individual's done here is they've created their flashcard by adding in these bullet points. And that point where I mentioned how easy was it for Chris to read those original flashcards now is addressed because it's one, very easy to read. It's also in a font that's clear and easy for the user to understand. The accessibility aspects really comes in handy here because you can display it in any sort of font you want. Open Dyslexia, for example, as shown here. Um, but also the focus part is important here. As you can see from the animation, the user here is scrolling upwards. It's clearly highlighted the point they're currently talking about, and they can see clearly what are they going to be talking about next. They can anticipate that. So everything's there, very easy to use. Now, there's an additional thing we've added on to the tool, aside from just the bullet points. So on your flashcard, each slide, I know I'm on slide one. These are the 5 points I want to talk about. However, some other information you can add on, we call them safety nets. So you guys could probably see the pop-up icon there with the three dots, the little pop-up bubble icon. This is additional information. So this is basically, for example, there, the three layers of the heart, I can now click on my safety net and see what they were. Or as you see here, person can add an image to. So if you're better at describing in an image versus words, definitely add in an image. Very useful, and I'll give you my own personal example. Why it comes in handy is if I'm delivering any new content or a presentation or anything I'm talking about that's very content heavy and it's new to me. That's where my safety net really comes in handy because I can add in information in here that I may or may not forget. So if I need it, I have it there. So I don't have to worry about it. My safety net's there for me to help me out. The pictures are good because obviously if there's something that is better explained by describing it on the picture for yourself, definitely utilize that. Also, some you can have an image that has a calming effect to you. So some users may want to do that. So if you're at a point during that presentation where the anxiety and stress is built up, have an image of your pets, your kids if you want, just to calm yourself, control your breathing, so you have your tempo and flow back in control. Again, the keyword safety net, use it as and when you need, however many times you need it. Now, this is the part where the tool really, really benefits a lot of users, and that's the self improvement. To me, this is the self improvement and self assessment part. It's the rehearsal mode. Now, assume you're the user here who's created all the flashcards for each slide. And now what you want to do is practice like you would with any presentation. When you turn on the rehearsal mode in the app, what it's doing, it's recording your audio, which is brilliant because as you listen back to it, what you can do during that presentation, if there's something I was not happy with, as shown in this animation, the person could click on the flag and say, wasn't quite happy with my delivery there. I want to come back to that. Or if you like to think positively, you can view the flags as a positive thing. Let's say glass is half full. I'm happy with that section. I'm going to flag it. So all the flags represent good. So however you want to use the flags, it's there for you. But the key part here is your self-improvement, self-assessment. There's also a timer you'll notice right above at the top there, which allows you to measure how long you're taking on each slide. Because again, the key thing here is now I'm going to go back and listen to my entire slide deck, or I can just listen to the flag parts and really improve on my delivery, maybe my pronunciation. Am I speaking too fast? All those items, but you're able to address those through your own pace and your own time. Thing to note here also on the right hand side, you'll notice the timestamps for each slide. This is useful if you have a time restriction on the content you're delivering. So it allows you to say, am I taking too long on this slide? Can I add more information in? All those things. If there's no time restriction and the clock is actually giving you stress and anxiety, you can turn it off in the settings. So that's fine too. There for you if you need it. Now, the PowerPoint aspect that I wanted to touch on, it's a really easy integration. It's pretty much a two-step integration. The key benefit here is you're now able to do more with the app because essentially you'll be able to control your slides with the app. So not only are you using it as the flashcards, but when you want to move on to the next slide, you will use the app and just press on the next slide there. So you don't have to worry about pressing a clicker or the keyboard. It's all in there for you, which also reduces the stress and anxiety because then you're not worrying about controlling multiple tools at the same time of delivery. So a lot of benefits of having the PowerPoint add-in. Another benefit is because the two notes now sync because everything's stored in the cloud. If some users prefer typing their notes on a keyboard, they can do so as well. They will sync up with their app on, so they can type it on PowerPoint and it'll sync up onto the app, and vice versa. So I want to touch a little bit more on the personalization part. This is important because this is really talking about the things that are key to us and what we're really passionate about. So first is the visual preferences. You've got the color overlays. So any background color settings you want, you can change those in the settings in the personalized part. You can also change the fonts. So you can change the size of the font or select Open Dyslexia or Open Sans, as I mentioned before. I would recommend when you set up the app, do these settings at the start. If you need to tweak it afterwards, feel free to do that afterwards. Apologies, I'm going to just take a gulp of water. Dry throat. And you can also have the timer. You can turn it on or off. One thing to note, we added this on. This is a really useful feature for a lot of students, is the text to speech. It's got a built-in text to speech. And what it does is you can, instead of reading your bullet points, you can turn on the audio cues, plug in a headset, and have your bullet point notes read to you rather than having to read them. Very useful for students who want to use it. We also have the reverse in here, the speech to text. So now instead of typing out my notes, I can actually dictate them in, and they'll automatically populate into the bullet points. So really useful. Both of those are there for users who need them. So a good thing to talk about now is it just for presentations? Is the tool just for presentations, remote and in person? So let's debunk that myth. Yes, it is for presentations, but you can do a lot more. Essentially, there's 5 core functionalities that you can actually utilize the tool for. And I'll touch on some of these right now. So if you're an ESL second language learner, you can utilize the tool for that. We have a colleague who's studying Portuguese, who's actually using the tool to practice her Portuguese and learn the language. So essentially, in rehearsal mode, she's able to practice a phrase, and in the safety net, she's able to write the translation of that phrase in her native tongue, and then in rehearsal mode, practice the phrase. How was the pronunciation? How did it go? Really, really useful, particularly if English is not your native language and you have a lot of students in that group. Definitely recommend it for there. Exam prep is a really big one that I'm hearing more and more, how this is actually more becoming a study tool also, not just for presentations. But in the same way, how we would use in the old fashioned way, the flashcard, you'd write the question on one side and the answers on the back side. you would have in the same way use the tool this way. You would write you on the bullet points would be your questions, on the safety net would be your answers. And you can have that hidden and in rehearsal mode, practice your answers, check it if you got it right. Really good way to prep. And I'll quickly touch on the other two interviews. So anyone in transition or the career center, you're working with students in those. Again, we have step-by-step guides to show you how exactly the student would use this. But I can touch on that more later on in a follow-up demonstration with yourself. But interviews is very good to develop skill sets to do interviews. Now, these are interviews not just for remote, but also in person for both the environments. And then group discussion. So this could be any sort of class activity or a project work that's been you're involved with as a group, and you've been given a task to do as a group. Using it in that format where you're able to collate ideas together, populate them on the app, and use it really as a note-taking tool within the group, and then using those notes within the app to build your presentation. So it's very interesting how you can utilize them. And it's not surprising that a lot of students may actually find dual functionalities. So the same person that's using it for exam prep could possibly also be using it for their presentations. So that's that's a little bit of example in terms of the app, what it can do. I do have some examples of uh, some students and student personas, but I am going to skip on that for now. The reason being is because of time, and I want to be respectful of your time to allow you time to ask us questions and give us enough time. But please do get in touch. We have lots of student examples of different environments that I can discuss with you, and I can show you how exactly they're using in different environments. The pilot program, to touch on that real quickly, how it works is we are launching this for the first time now in 2021 for any K-12 or higher education institution. It's a free semester-long pilot. We will give you staff licenses for the staff that's involved with the pilot, but also you'll get 25 licenses for free for students that you're able to now do your own due diligence. Test it out, see how it works, get your qualitative, quantitative data, and you're able to then stress test it. Is this tool appropriate for my students? What can I do? What functions are they using? You'll receive full training from us. We'll give you all the support. A dedicated account manager will be there to support you with surveys, etc. We'll help you with collecting your data that you need, any sort of data in terms of surveys or feedback that you want from students. We'll advise you on that too. Um, the only thing we ask is that try to get your confirmations of whether you're going for the pilot no later than 2 weeks before your semester starts. And the reason for that being is to allow enough time for you to implement your pilot correctly, and so you have enough time to train not just yourself but any students that you have. Okay, I'm just going to launch one final poll before we take questions. So please do bear with me here, and you will see it on your screen. And this allows both Adam and myself to understand a little bit more what your interests are, what you'd be interested in, so we can address them afterwards too. So just let us know if you're interested in knowing a little bit more. So if you want a demo for the tool, you want to know more about the Neet program, you want to speak to Adam about communication challenges a little bit more, or if you're interested in the pilot program. So you'll see it on your screen now. Please do select, and you can select multiple options, by the way, so don't worry that you have to pick one or the other. Brilliant. We'll just end the poll now so everyone's had a chance to now answer. Okay, and we will be in touch with you. So anything you've selected there, depending on what you've selected, be in touch. If you weren't able to select, then obviously I'll put our contact details up too. So I want to thank everyone. Let's take some questions. I'm mindful that we might be going slightly a bit over, so apologies for that. But I think it's important to address your questions too. But before we do, our contact details are here. So Adam's email address and mine, and also our website addresses too. So please do get in touch with us for anything you have or you've seen on the presentation today. But Kara, let's take some questions.
Yeah, really great presentation, guys. I really enjoyed it. So thanks for that. I've also shared the links as well to the Neet Center and Adam's email in the chat. And I've also shared our pilot program details and your email there as well, Amir. We did have a question really early on from Timothy McHenry, and that was about a VPAT. But I'm
Hmm.
thinking, I don't know if you can answer that just now, or if we'd rather kind of follow up on that.
Yeah, and Tim, hello again, by the way. Recognize Tim's name there. Yeah, VPAT forms, that will be something that we will be completing and getting set up to ensure that every institution, or whether it's an AT state program, that if they have a VPAT requirement, that we are part of that VPAT vendor program, and we've
Perfect.
got the forms filled out. So those will be done.
Great. We did have another question as well from Kelly's just popped one in just now. Have you had students use Present Pal and then develop the skills needed to alleviate anxiety, and to which they do not have to rely on the tool as much? So if you had a student that used Present Pal, but then maybe is getting better and better, just looking for an example of that.
Yeah, so this is an apology. This is where I had to skip some of the presentation. So a really good examples, the student personas that we talked about. So Kelly, we could definitely share those with you. And if you wanted additional demonstration about live examples, we could discuss that. But these are examples where someone's using the tool to self-improve during rehearsal mode, using the tool, what their confidence, and the overall effect, the cascading effect of that is that during the presentation they're more prepared and they feel better about the content, so there's lesser chance of anxiety taking over versus the presentation being good.
Yeah, and I think just to add on the back of that as well, I think it's obviously you want to become the best presenter that you can. If you are using something like PresentPal to support you through that and actually develop your content even more, I think that's great. You know, you can use it to begin with. You might have a more basic presentation because that's kind of what your confidence allows. But you could develop more and more skills using PresentPal to become the kind of best presenter that you can be. Um, so thanks for that question, Kelly, and great to see you again. Adam, we had one come in just kind of personally to me about the Neet Center, and it's probably the last question. I've just been mindful of time, but someone was asking, how does the Neet Center work with institutions and school districts?
Great question. For K through 12, for example, in Connecticut, we actually have a state contract with all the public school districts, and we provide AT evaluations and consultations and other services to them. When it comes to institutions like higher ed and that sort of thing, a couple of them are NEET members. Being a Neet member basically means you have access to all of our webinars. You also have access to our lending library, where we have a host of assistive technology, both digital and physical, including PresentPal, and we can loan that out on a trial period to institutions and schools that are members, and individuals with disabilities are automatically considered members as well. They can try it out before they make any decisions to purchase anything, because sometimes assistive technology can be expensive. That's a quick overview of what we do. We do so much. If it's AT related, we will have a service for it, even if it's not defined on our website. So if you ever have any more questions about that, please reach out to me and I'll either answer it or forward you to one of our other team members who would be better for the question.
That's great. Thanks so much. It's quite a big question, so that was a great kind of brief brief answer there. Yeah, so I think probably in the kind of purposes of time, I mean, we're probably going to wrap up here. But any kind of final thoughts from yourself, Adam?
Final thoughts would be, I love how you talked about Present Pal and Merit, because I love how you talked about how it can better specifically address the barriers that I was talking about, while those common accommodations just may not. And that defeats the purpose of accommodations. They're supposed to address the specific barriers, and Present Pal offers a lot of features and options that do just that.
And
Amazing.
I want to just say thank you to Adam, by the way. for one, your time, and thank you to everyone who joined in today. But this is a big event for us, just to say personally, for myself and Kara and the team at Present Pal, because this is number one of our series of our large webinars. So keep an eye out. We will be doing many more of these throughout the year in 2021. So we'll invite you over to those, and but we're very proud to have this, and very proud to have Adam join us on this. So thank you everyone for joining. Hopefully you found this very useful. Get in touch with us if you need anything else, and we'll be Merry Christmas everyone, and Happy New Year too, by the way.
Thanks very much, guys.